All right. So welcome everybody to our bi-weekly group hug webinars. Today we're going to be talking about what exactly is zero waste, featuring Nicole Grossberg, who's here with us from Zero Waste NYC Workshop. I'm going to give a quick introduction about who I am, what group hug is, and then I'm just going to hand it over to Nicole to kick us off. So if you're new to group hug, my name is Crystal. I'm the founder and CEO. At Group Hug Solar, we like to say that we make ridiculously good-looking solar panels that are easy to use. Here's a quick demonstration of how it works. It's a solar panel that's designed to hang in any sunny window. There's a built-in battery and USB port, so you can charge any device off the grid. And we really started this company to be someone's first step in solar energy because it can be a really intimidating process to get into. This talk is not about Group Hug, so if you're interested in learning more about us, go to grouphugsolar.com. There's tons of information there, and you can check out the products too. We're also on Instagram. We post something almost every day about sustainability or solar, so if you're interested in daily solar content, definitely follow us. And with that, there's an old one, rooftop solar. We're not talking about rooftop solar today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and dive right into zero waste. So Nicole, if you want to take it away.
All right, I sure will.
And then while Nicole sets up, if anybody has any questions while Nicole is talking, please, please, please write them in the chat. I'm going to be reading the chat and asking Nicole the questions that you guys ask. So I know this group won't disappoint us. You guys always ask really good questions, so keep the questions coming. And with that, thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you both, Crystal and Emma, for having me. I'm really excited. I'm obviously very familiar with Group Hug Solar. We kind of have a nice little sustainability community, if you will, in New York City. I don't have a panel yet, but I plan on getting one. So thank you guys for having me tonight. So I'm Nicole Grossberg. I'm the founder of Zero Waste NYC Workshop. I'll tell you guys a little bit about the workshop series and how we got started, and then we will talk a little bit about zero waste and what exactly that means, and I'll give you some tips and tricks. So Zero Waste NYC Workshop, we're an education and consulting company which was established to provide resources and inspire people to lower their impact on the planet and go, I like to say, low waste, even though zero waste is in the title. And we were founded in September 2019. We teamed up with a Sanitation Foundation, which is the official nonprofit organization for DSNY, which is the Department of Sanitation here in New York City. So we host monthly workshops, which focus on a variety of sustainability topics and about waste topics. So we're able to bring together environmentally conscious people in New York City and outside of New York City, and hopefully inspire them and give them really good actions about how they can make this a more approachable way of life. So the mission of our workshop series is obviously first and foremost to educate people on how to go and live a low waste lifestyle, but we also want to provide resources for them to embark on that lifestyle. We want to connect them with other zero wasters in New York and beyond New York, establish a larger community of zero waste advocates so we can spread the word and influence even more people to join the movement. We want to amplify influential voices within the sustainability space. So definitely members of the BIPOC community, people who are talking about some really hard-hitting topics that we might not be exposed to, especially within the zero waste space. And then we want to offer a safe space for people to talk about really important topics, like I mentioned, about environmental racism, social justice, anything else that kind of pertains to eco-anxiety. So a little bit about me, and I'm not going to go through all the details of this, but this is just like a quick snapshot timeline of how I got to where I am. And I like to go through this to kind of just remind people that there's no real perfect track to get to do something that you love doing. And I love what I'm doing now, but I wasn't always doing that. So I just hope this inspires people that you can kind of recreate yourself at any time. So I graduated with my degree in marketing in 2008 from SUNY Albany. I worked for 2 years and then actually went back to grad school to get my master's degree in school counseling, which is kind of random, but I guess it comes full circle because now I'm educating. I got my first advertising job in 2013, decided to go back to marketing, and did that for about 4 or 5 years straight, just jumping from different agencies within New York City. I started my own personal zero waste journey in 2017. In July 2018, I decided to leave the agency world officially and pursue a career in sustainability, which is what I kind of felt like I always would end up doing. And in the fall of 2018, I began freelancing full-time, looking for clients in the sustainability field in New York City. September 2019, I decided that I was just going to take a giant leap and host a workshop in New York City and see what happened. I thought I would be lucky to get 10 people in a room, and I got about 45. So it was an incredible experience. And from there is where I partnered with Sanitation Foundation after the first workshop. And here we are today. We have a full-blown workshop series. We do monthly events to talk about zero waste, and it's a really exciting time for us. And I love what I do, as I said. So it's been a great path. So like most companies before COVID, things were a little bit different, and we were doing live workshops once a month. We were at various places around New York City having live audience. We had networking. We had a complete zero waste event with reusable cups and farmers market delivery service, doing a spread of fruits and vegetables and panelists. It was amazing. It was great energy. So these are just some pictures and examples of some of the workshops we've done. Recycling therapy in January 2020, some pictures. We did zero waste fashion and beauty in February. Need some photos from that. That was our last in-person event. And then we quickly switched to virtual workshops in March, as you can imagine. So Zoom has been our favorite place. So just examples of some topics that we've covered. How do we make zero waste more equitable in July? We did innovation in sustainability and waste in September. We did low waste parenting in October, sustainable food systems in December. So a lot of different topics for really anybody and everybody. And that's enough about the workshop series. And I love to jump in. This is a really, really pared down version of what I normally talk about with Zero Waste 101. I usually takes about 60 to 90 minutes to kind of get through everything that I want to go over, but for the sake of time and letting you guys ask questions, I'm going to do a really abridged version of it. So why zero waste in the first place? Well, that's because our planet is currently facing a climate emergency. So wildfires, hurricanes, extreme temperatures in Texas, which seems to be relevant right now, rising sea levels, some of the effects that we're experiencing right now for climate change, and that we won't actually be able to reverse, and we can only try and kind of mitigate the issues that are happening. So emissions also need to go down by 55% by 2030, and we need to hit net zero by 2050 in order to limit the global warming that's happening right now. So this is definitely a serious issue, and I feel the biggest issue that's our generation is facing today. And a lot of these changes are closely connected to waste. So I love to do this activity in the beginning of almost all my workshops. And I would love if you guys could take a minute and drop in the chat, what is 1 or 2 words that come to mind when you hear zero waste? And then if you want to answer, what level of zero waste you consider yourself? And beginner or have no idea is totally fine. But if you're maybe intermediate or advanced, I consider myself advanced. But yeah, I'm curious what everybody thinks about zero waste, because I know sometimes it can be, I think intimidating is like the #1 word I hear. Hard work, yep. Advanced circular design. No plastic, beginner, yep. Non-biodegradable, yep. Yeah, so I think the theme here is that it's hard, sustainable living for sure. It's definitely, I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. It's not something that happens overnight. I always like to tell people it's better if you think about it compartmentalized and you kind of take an audit of what you're doing in your daily life and then the different materials that you have all around your apartment or house. And then you kind of like separate it room by room or either aspect of your life so that you don't have to kind of tackle it all at once. It's like, that's why they call it a zero waste journey instead of, you know, it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint, and you can't change overnight. So to me, the concept of zero waste is defined as diverting as much material from landfill as possible. We do that by refusing, reducing, reusing, recycling, and then or rotting or composting in order to actually divert those materials. So waste prevention and recycling are important strategies to actually reducing greenhouse gases for many reasons, but just some of them here. Reducing emissions from energy consumption, reducing emissions from incinerators or actually sending items to landfill and being burned, reduce methane emissions from landfill, which mostly comes from organics or food scraps, and then actually increasing the storage of carbon in trees. And I do want to take a second here and let everybody take a little bit of a deep breath. I know it seems intimidating and I understand being overwhelmed at the beginning, but the idea here is to not be perfect. And I always say it's a shame that it's called zero waste. And it's a shame that I have to have zero waste in the name of my company because I'm a low waste person. I'm not a zero waste. I cannot fit all my garbage in a mason jar in the course of a year. It's impossible. I mean, if people can do it, I give them credit, but it's definitely not easy. So for me, progress is definitely the best way to go, not perfection. And that quote that a lot of people have probably heard is true. We just need a bunch of people doing a little bit better than everyone being perfect, whatever it is. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I'm so glad you bring up the mason jar thing because I feel like it's become this like marketing tactic almost to be like, look at my trash, and you see the photo and it's powerful, but I just feel like that's so intimidating, at least for
Yeah.
me, to sorry, there's honking, to imagine all of my trash in a mason jar, and it makes me not want to do it actually.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, as a person who's very low waste, I don't have a lot of trash. I have a lot of recycling just because it's the nature of the
Right.
world we live in. I can't avoid packaged goods. I have TerraCycle boxes right behind me, so that's
I
definitely
see,
an
yeah.
advantage. And then I compost food. I reuse where I can. So there's very little that I am throwing out, but I don't want it to give the perception that I am fitting everything into a jar. And that it's not, if you're trying to attain that, you're going to be discouraged. So that's not something I tell people
Yeah.
to strive for.
Also, it's not like you have that little material that's going different places. It's like you have separate like recycling and then TerraCycle. So like you have better end cycles for stuff rather than just having no stuff that has an end cycle.
Yeah. And we have separate bins in the apartment for everything. So in the kitchen, there's 3 cans. There's one for metal, glass, plastic, one for cardboard, one for our garbage, which is the smallest one. And then we have the TerraCycle in here, and we have a bin in our freezer for food scrap. So everything is like clearly, and it's funny because when we have people over, I mean, again, pre-COVID, when we had people over, everyone comes over and they're like, just tell me what to do with this. Where's it go? Like everyone knows when they come to my apartment, but it makes it easier because everything has a place. So a really simple way to think about zero waste and just lowering your waste in general is to kind of go back to the basics. And a lot of us learned maybe back in elementary or middle school, reduce, reuse, recycle. So I think it makes sense to add refuse on the top, because if you can, even before reducing what you use, if you could just kind of say no completely to anything disposable or single use or free, going to conferences or different events where people are just giving things away, if you can say no to those. And then at the bottom, rot is composting or dropping off your food scraps. More about that in a bit. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. And again, this is a really abridged version, but the point here is to make simple swaps. So pretty much anything that you could imagine in that is single use that you might use that's made of plastic or something you buy over and over again, there's either a refill or a low waste or zero waste version of it. There's like shampoo and conditioner bars, for example, or there's refill options through companies like Loop, or there's a lot of local shops here in New York City as well. For females, we have menstrual cups instead of tampons. There's refillable deodorant. There's do-it-yourself. There's reusable cloth towels, plastic bags, tote bags. There's anything you can think of in your apartment or house that you have single use, you can find a substitute, usually in the price range that works for you. Or you can make your own. And then a couple of really, I think, easy, low impact changes that you can make are definitely reducing your overall meat intake. I would say I'm a pescatarian, so I still eat fish, but my main diet in my home is vegan. And lowering your meat intake is one of the biggest things that you can do to actually have a more positive impact on the climate. Shopping for food locally is a huge thing that I advocate for. So, there's a lot of emissions that come from that food that's traveling to the grocery stores, and the farming practices that are happening with agriculture now, and the more, I can't think, factory farming is definitely not good on the planet. So if you can go to a farmer's market, if you can do a community supported agriculture program, if you can look at a farmer's market delivery service like Farm to People, it's what I use, definitely give it a try. Ride sharing, biking, walking, shopping secondhand, that's again one of the biggest things I always advocate for. I would say like 85 to 90% of the items in my apartment were furnished through like Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp or just Craigslist, different places like that. And then support and buy from brands that are really truly exercising sustainable practices. Like regenerative agriculture, for example, is a great practice to actually sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And then just make sure you're doing your homework and asking questions, because you as a consumer deserve to know what's going into your products and how they're being produced. So some reuse tips: find another use for old items, try upcycling or do-it-yourself projects, go shopping, look for bargains in old furniture and home goods. So as I mentioned, I think Facebook Marketplace is one of the best things ever invented. I barely buy anything new anymore because everything I can find is on there and it's for a reduced price. And it makes me feel like I get a high from it almost.
Nicole, I just wrote in the chat that Facebook Marketplace is the best part of Facebook. Like that should just be
Yes.
Facebook now. We don't need the old Facebook, because I totally
so
agree
true.
with you. I find stuff on there all the time, and my sister is a parent and she finds, I think someone in the chat mentioned that parenting and low waste is really hard, and you know, she's able to find so much stuff on there. It's really good.
Especially for kids, because they outgrow things so quickly, like
Exactly.
with clothing and their toys. I mean, it's almost, and I shop for my friends and family's kids on there too. Like,
Yeah.
and they don't know. I get them brand new. I mean, it's like they haven't even been open. So yeah, it's great. And then also thrift stores. I'm a big thrift store shopper, and New York City, we're so spoiled. There's so many. Also Poshmark and ThredUp. There's great online sites if you're not comfortable going to the store right now. A big thing definitely is donating. If you can't sell old items through some of these stores or through some of the online shops that I mentioned, donating and making sure you're doing your homework with the correct donation companies and making sure they're really actually donating them properly and not just sending them overseas. Donate NYC is a great platform through sanitation in New York. There's probably a lot of programs through your local municipality or city if you want to check out their website. In New York, we have great Instagram accounts like Curb Alert and Stooping In, which is like Stooping in New York, Stooping in Queens, or Stooping in Upper West Side, where you can find items that are literally left on the curb or on the street, and you can tag items that you find. Buy Nothing is another great group. There's a Facebook group, a Buy Nothing Facebook group for pretty much every neighborhood, city, country in the world. So you can find your local Buy Nothing group. Bringing reusable containers to restaurants, and then repair. I think repairing is like an underrated kind of skill that a lot of people don't have now, that like our parents and grandparents used to do. So learning how to mend and repair clothing especially is just a great skill to have, and you can always look at YouTube videos for ways to do that. Recycling is a big one, and I always like to lead this section of it by saying recycling is not the answer. So recycling should be, and that's the reason why that's almost the last R, or it is the last R, is because if you can't do any of the above R's by refusing, reducing, reusing, then recycling properly is definitely the answer. So it's important to make sure you know how to properly recycle, but I wouldn't encourage you to rely on that as a way to be a low waste person. So just an example here, 2017, this was the DSNY's, they do a study every few years about the composition of garbage. So this is the curbside, everything that goes into landfill. You can see 34% is metal, glass, plastic, and cardboard, which could have gone to recycling. 34% is organics, which is food scraps and yard waste. 9% is e-waste and textiles, and then 23% is other. So 18% of what New Yorkers throw away is being recycled. That's just such a small rate. So 77% of that could be recycled. So we're not doing a great job right now. So quick reminder of what's recyclable. Mixed in New York, again, specifically, definitely check with your local municipality if you are not in New York. But here we do mixed paper, cardboard in one bin, metal, glass, plastic in another bin. You can put out appliances in your metal, glass, plastic, blue bin. A lot of people don't know that, like pots and pans and microwaves and small appliances, aluminum foil. Rigid plastic, we don't go by the numbers in New York. You see on the bottom, it just goes rigid and non-rigid. And then in the metal, glass, plastic, you can also put cartons. Just some common items that are not accepted. And Crystal, cut me off anytime if I'm going over, but I'm almost finished.
No, I think this is great. And I actually just wanted to add one comment, because I think what's interesting from my perspective, and I'm sure Emma is a little similar, like Emma is studying, she's currently in school studying industrial design, product design. I study product design. I think there's probably some other people here that might be designers as well. And I literally in school took classes about how to injection mold plastic. Like it's just so, and now I'm like, oh, like that's kind of, I guess that's part of the design world. But I think, it makes me think about how on the design side, there's so much influence and decision making that happens when, like, there are people who pick the number of plastic in your products. Like, a person picks that. And I think it's so important to remember that, like, there's so many different levels of change, and even just having more eco-conscious designers to pick more responsible materials to avoid some of these waste streams is, like, I think so important, so that it doesn't land always on the consumers to have to like
100%.
memorize 18 sorting methods, you know?
Well, yeah, and there's actually a pretty big movement right now around something called EPR, which is extended producer responsibility, which is basically putting the onus back on these companies and taking it away from individuals.
Yeah.
So that's something, and that's kind of getting like more complicated and getting into the weeds on things. But since you brought it up, I think it's one of the best ways to kind of also get involved in the movement is like, you can make individual lifestyle changes, but what are you going to do to put the pressure back on the biggest polluters and these corporations that are actually making these products in the first place, like you said? So
yeah,
if you just Google EPR or look into it, and then go to your local Swab meetings too. There's also a group called Beyond Plastics where you can sign petitions and help advocate for a lot of these federal bills now that they're working on, which is to put the onus back on these corporations. There's one right now that's called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's a long one, long name, but yeah, where there's like it's a whole slew of different laws that would, in this bill, that would basically put the pressure back onto these companies and make them responsible for disposal. And they have to put a certain amount of recycled content into their products. And we need federal legislation definitely to change that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the part that I find so frustrating is like so Group Hug is a company, right? We sell things for money. And I think at the end of the day, I care so much about what my customers say. Like if I got the same suggestion every day, I would try to do it because I want customers to be happy and I need customers to sustain the business. And I think most businesses, no matter how big they are, kind of operate that way because they want to satisfy the needs of their customers because they need them to make money, right? So you would, like, when you actually complain to companies and give them feedback, if enough people do it, it makes such a big difference because companies, like, now we're seeing, you know, sustainability kind of trend in certain categories. Like, what was it? Dove just came out with their deodorant and reusable things.
Yep.
And like, I'm sure that thousands and thousands of people told them, I like your deodorant, but I need it to be zero waste. And then they changed it. So it really does make a difference because at the end of the day, companies want your money. And if you won't spend with them unless there's zero waste, they're going to change. And it might take a couple years, unfortunately, but I think, the advocating for more company responsibility is so important.
Exactly. And I say that too. That's another good way to get involved. And even just like sending a tweet. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to feel like you have to have like a handwritten letter sent to the CEO. Like just literally send a tweet like once a week or Instagram comment, like whatever it is that you're comfortable with and sharing. I think, it's absolutely crucial that we bring awareness to it and ask for what we want, because you're right, that's what's going to get the companies to actually change is the consumer needs.
Companies like fear social media because honestly it freaks me out sometimes because like one angry tweet and people can get a bad impression of your company, but I think if you do it with the intent of change, it is super powerful.
You know what else it is too?
It gets attention.
Yeah. You also, for me, I always tell people, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I just did this today. I had a company reach out to me that I had actually never heard of them. They do shampoo and conditioner bars, and they asked if they could send me samples as part of one of my workshops to audience. And they said, "Oh, we're really proud of that. We don't greenwash." So I said, "Great. Could you just tell me a little bit about your upstream production process, like including your materials, your packaging, your energy usage, your water consumption?" Like I basically just broke it down and like, if you could just tell me what that looks like briefly. So I kind of like put the onus back on them and was like, that's awesome. Like you can tell me you're not greenwashing, but now I want to hear it. And I think, you know, we all have that right as a consumer to know like what exactly is going on. So if you go on their website, and you can't find that information, you should ask them.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, we could talk about that all night.
Yeah, all day.
But keep going and then we'll make sure we get to people's questions.
Cool. So these are just some common items that are not accepted. I think probably the biggest surprise to people is this coffee cup. It's actually made from a multi-layer material. There's an inner lining on it in it that keeps your drink warm and not disintegrate from the hot drink. So that's actually like a plastic film or waxy film, and it can't be recycled by conventional means. But these are just some ones that people might put in the bin, and they actually aren't recyclable. So my favorite one is actually rot, and that's composting. So people ask me a lot, what is one thing that I could do? Like, I don't want to get involved in doing, making my whole lifestyle change, but like, what's one thing I can do to lower my waste? I always say compost. And when I say compost, it's actually, we're taking part in the process of composting. I don't actually compost. I just divert my food scraps. So, but it is really one of the most impactful things you can do, because when food sits in a landfill, it emits methane because it is not getting oxygen in that landfill. It's under obviously a bunch of other garbage. And because there's a lack of oxygen to that food waste, that's what's happening, where it's emitting that methane, which is like 72 more times potent than carbon dioxide. So it's extremely damaging to the atmosphere. One of the worst things that we have going on right now. So there's plenty of options. You can compost at home. If you're lucky enough to have an outdoor space, you can do a backyard compost pile. You can buy a tumbler. You can do vermicomposting with it, which is with worms, which sounds intimidating, but it's actually really easy and kind of fun. Bokashi is another method. And then in New York, we're actually really lucky that we have this like really robust drop-off system. So there's over 100 different food scrap drop-off places and locations within the 5 boroughs where you can bring your scraps. And then there's also pickup. So you can work with local businesses and some private haulers, is what they're called, people who are hauling the waste away. And you can pay sometimes a very minimal fee to have somebody come to your house directly and pick up your scraps. Oh, didn't want that. Okay. So yeah, like I said, in New York City, most people, what they do is because most of them have small apartments and we don't have a lot of space to keep the food scraps, we actually keep them in the freezer. And then we drop them off either on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis to one of those drop-off sites, which are known as FSDOs. There's a tracker here that another member of the sustainability community in New York City made, Belinda. And it's actually a bit.ly link right there, super easy to use. And it's every single drop-off site and actually pickup too service that you can use within New York. So I encourage people to use that link for sure.
Wait, did you say Belinda?
So Belinda Chu, her name is A Healthy Blueprint on Instagram.
Oh, cool. Okay.
She is the one who started this tracker.
Oh, wow. Also, is that actually your fridge? Like your fridge is that clean? Okay.
No, it's not. No, it's definitely not.
I was like, oh my God. Ooh, mine.
It's funny. I thought about putting a picture
in
of my
freezer that I've been procrastinating. I have like bags of food in my freezer.
Well, at least it's in your freezer and not in the garbage.
My freezer does not look like that.
Neither does mine. I thought about putting a picture of my freezer and then I was like, no, this is not acceptable. So the last really main point I want to drive home is, a lot of people ask this as well, like zero waste is expensive. It doesn't have to be. I will say that, of course, I would acknowledge the fact that zero waste, there are some products that are much more expensive than single-use items. But overall, living a zero waste or a low waste lifestyle should cost you way less in the long run. So when you're, especially with buying secondhand and you're reusing items over and over again, it's much more cost effective than buying something new every single time you need to consume. And I always say too, swap what you can, do what you can, reduce where you can. We don't need people being perfect. We just need everyone to contribute to the problem, to making it better. And that's the end of that. I just basically have some places here that you guys can find me, but I would love to open it up to whatever questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for everyone that's in the webinar now, we're going to send you a follow-up email with all of this, with these links, so that you can follow up with Nicole and follow her on social. I'm going to go through this.
While you filter through, Crystal, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I feel like I do a lot of these things just naturally. Like, I don't know if it's just because of my generation or like the people that I surround myself with. Obviously, I work at Group Hug, but I feel like when I have been away at college and I go home to my parents' house, I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom is such a single-use person. And I feel like I try to have conversations with her. But like, what would you say like is the easiest way to help someone make that jump who is like obsessed with their old brands, like their Olay face lotion and their Dove, like very like in the generation of brand loyalty? Like, how could I help her without like doing a workshop like this with her?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's tough because I don't like to talk at people and tell them what they should be doing. I actually like, for me personally, I like to lead by example. And a lot
Yeah.
of what you do comes up naturally in conversation and people are curious. And I feel like there's times where I influence people where I don't even know that I am. So I think the first thing I would say is to just kind of like exercise your zero waste practices or your low waste practices around, it was your mom, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, around her more. But also like maybe try gifting her some zero waste stuff, maybe for like the next birthday or holiday, and get her like a little zero waste kit, or get her some brands that are zero waste that you really like and think are comparable to what she's using. And then if she gets to try it, she might be more likely to actually use it for the long term. So I think those are two like easy ways that you can maybe just kind
Yeah.
of like slowly lead her into that direction.
Yeah, that's an awesome suggestion.
So there's actually a lot of comments in the chat, and I think a lot of people here have some really great advice actually for companies that they're recommending. So Emma, maybe we can
Cool.
copy the chat and share out some of the companies people have mentioned.
Yeah, definitely.
We just got a question from Karen who said, I feel you on this, Karen. She says that a lot of meat substitute products like veggie burgers and sausages come in plastic packaging, usually hidden in the cardboard. Any ideas on how to bypass that? Oh, Karen, sorry about that. I mispronounced. But yeah, that I find frustrating because usually, vegan companies are more eco-conscious, but then on the packaging, I'm sure there's some food safety thing that they have to follow. But yeah, any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I struggle with that too because I eat a lot of meat substitutes. I mean, so hardcore vegans will tell you that those meat substitutes are not exactly the most eco-friendly to begin with or sustainable because of the way they're produced and all the ingredients that they use. So like, I think a lot of like really intense hardcore, maybe environmentalists would tell you should be making your own stuff and eating whole foods anyway. That being said, I have cravings sometimes for meat. I used to eat meat before my zero waste transformation, so I like a lot of those. And I mean, TerraCycle is like my savior, and I know it's not necessarily affordable for everybody because the boxes are not cheap, but I do get the boxes in a partnership with TerraCycle. So if you are in New York, I let anybody stop by and bring their items that they can't. So if somebody's asking what TerraCycle. So TerraCycle is a social enterprise that actually helps recycle non-recyclable items. So they have a big warehouse in New Jersey where they actually take these items, so all different plastics, for example, and they melt it into one. It's obviously a very safe process, not emitting any emissions. And then they either resell it or they make it into new products to resell it, or they do all different things with them. I mean, they kind of like do magic, within their office, but they'll pretty much take anything and everything. And they also work with a bunch of brands and manufacturers with take back programs. So there's a bunch of free programs that TerraCycle offers where you can actually go on their website, sign up, and you can get a pre-labeled mailing envelope, put in your packaging or your various items, and then send it back to them. So and they work with these brands directly, which is kind of like EPR that we were talking about, so that the brands have to figure out safely how to reuse those items.
And TerraCycle started Loop.
Yes. So Loop is another endeavor from TerraCycle, which is a complete refill program. So it's all around, they deliver all the containers, they'll refill it. When it's done, you send it back to them, they refill it, sanitize it, and then send it back to you. So it's delivered right to your door.
Yeah. So I have two questions for you, Nicole. One is that I know there are some programs more on the product side that will tell you Like if anyone's ever heard of Cradle to Cradle, which was a book and now a movement, and you can apply, to have your product get the Cradle to Cradle stamp. Do you know of any other ways that you can sort of tell if a company's practices are, up to a certain standard in circularity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say any B corporation is usually probably already using environmental standards that are better than the average company. So a B corporation is a certification of sorts where it's basically people, profit, and planet all on the same level. So, and they actually rate these companies that are certified B corporation. They have to go through a very strict standard and application process, and they have to redo it. They have to constantly redo it every year. And yeah, so I would say B corporations are like one of the first things I look at, and they get a score too on all these different topics. So environment, like I would go to the website and look at B Corp and see what their environment score is. There's some other certifications as well, but I would say if you can go on their website and look at their transparency, like if they have a lot of detail about their like under their sustainability tab and under the practices, that's a good indication that what they're doing is actually sustainable, if you will, because they're putting it out there. If a company just says like, well, we love sustainability and it's very vague, I would say that's already a red flag.
Got it.
And then there's other kind of like certifications you can look at too. Like there are some green companies that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I do know with fashion, there is Remake Our World does, they do some, what's the word, like rating, I guess, and vetting of fashion brands out there, and they give them different scores, and they give scores based on labor and diversity and inclusion as well as environment.
Okay.
So Remake Our World is a great site for textiles and fashion. But yeah, I think transparency is probably the number one, and then like how they answer your questions if you ask them for more information.
Yeah. And I think, I'm going to give some more time for people to ask questions. Joanne just dropped in the chat that Circularity Week is next month in March, which is true. It'll be all virtual, of course, but for anyone that's listening, definitely click on that link, circularityweek.com, because they have some really great events. I typically go to some every year.
We have a workshop during that week.
Oh, perfect. Cool. So you can see
Yeah.
Nicole again if you'd like next month. There's another good question in the chat that asks, how can we get more of NYC recycled trash to actually get recycled? Because I don't want to say it's shocking because I'm not that surprised, but it's disheartening, I guess, really sad and upsetting that so much of what goes in the trash could be diverted into other streams. What do you think are, like, I guess, is anything happening to fix that? Or what do you feel like could help tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. I think it comes down to education. I think a lot of people just don't know how to properly recycle, unfortunately. I think, climate change, environmentalism, sustainability, recycling, it needs to be in curriculum, K through 12. Like it needs to be mandated in the state, in the country, in the world. You need to start learning this from a young age. Like it's just as important, if not more, than learning about US history, learning about geometry, which, I mean, again, it's just my opinion, but I don't really use much of that, what I learned. And I mean, I like teaching children how to do their taxes and have a bank account and then properly recycle and how to be more sustainable, I think would be so much better for life skills down the road. I think it goes down to it comes down to education. And, I also think there's not a lot of consequences. Like your landlord will get, in New York, again, your landlord will get, they could get what's the word? Not a fee,
Fine?
I'm really thinking. A fine, thank you.
Yeah.
They could get a fine for not recycling properly, but like what it actually is, like who's policing this? Like, I don't think there's actually a lot of people who are making sure this is happening. And unfortunately that comes down to budget. But I think if people were made more aware of the proper way to do these things and what is actually happening in our landfills, maybe they'd be more motivated. So that's why I do what I do, which is like, I want to educate people, give you the tools, let you know what's happening so that you could actually do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know exactly which countries, but I feel like I've heard of certain countries where you actually need to pay per pound, right, of your trash.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that, well, I mean, on one hand, it's, for people who maybe can't afford to do that, it's really unfair. But I think on the flip side, it's a clear consequence for doing that. But again, I honestly always get stuck a little bit between the consumer, the burden that the consumer has versus the people actually producing the trash, which like
Yeah, I think it's way less on the consumer.
yeah.
I think to me, like the fact that I still go into a grocery store and I see 10 different companies putting up bottled water is like, I can't believe it. It blows my mind.
Oh my gosh.
So this, like, yeah, it should not be, you should not be allowed to manufacture a product in packaging that does not degrade and that stays in the planet for 500 plus years. And also bottling a product that's readily available for us as a natural resource. I mean, I don't want to go off, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it is. Emma, it would actually be interesting for us to do a talk like about plastic, because I think that's just a whole topic that we could get into. And I actually was talking to a friend the other day about plastic and how, I I I personally don't think plastic is like inherently a bad material. It's just used in like wrong ways.
Right.
But it's actually an amazing material because you're able to mold it in so many different ways. It's so strong and it can do these things. And like if plastic were used in like airplane parts and medical products, like that would make sense to me. Do we need plastic forks and bottles and all of this other stuff that's only used once? Like no. And I think
That's the thing. That's the key. It's only used once. So there's a lot of companies now that are running companies and using products that are plastic, but they're reusable plastic. So they're just using the plastic in a different way. So it's like instead of a single use food takeout container, they're actually using these containers like upwards of 1,000 or 2,000 times.
yeah.
So, I mean, you definitely have the issue of that plastic not being able to go anywhere, biodegrade, but instead of having it used one time, it's getting multiple uses, which is the whole idea of circularity. And then maybe that item gets broken down and becomes a different item. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely the key is the reuse part. Like, and somebody mentioned something in the chat too about biodegradable and compostable. And I'm
Yes.
all for that, but I think there's a lot of, yes, Deliver Zero is a great example of that. What I was thinking when I was talking about it. But to me, reuse is the best solution, like any type of single use, biodegradable, compostable, because you always have the manufacturing process. People forget about the upstream. So you're
Yeah.
still producing all of those items as well. If you can just reuse, if we can get into some type of like reuse program throughout just in life, it just becomes second nature to us. I think that's going to put us in a much better spot.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And
Also similar to how food scraps don't biodegrade in the landfill, those utensils that are organic and biodegradable don't either, correct?
Well, so compostable items usually will only break down in a commercial compost facility. So you have to make sure that it's going into that type of facility. And then a lot of these facilities actually don't even accept that material because it's just too difficult to break down. So to be honest, a lot of it just ends up in landfill anyway, which is
Yeah.
the sad truth. Yeah.
Especially when it's like fast food just to a normal consumer.
Right. And I mean, then you have to make sure you're putting it in the right bin. Again, onus on the consumer. So it's like, am I putting it in the right compostable bin? The lid is usually plastic, so it goes in a separate bin. Then the food goes, I mean, it's confusing and everyone's in a rush. So then do you know if their hauler is coming and bringing it to a commercial facility? It's like too many things to possibly keep track of. So yeah.
yeah. Nicole, I have one question for you. If you feel comfortable sharing, is there like a consistent product or thing you use that frustrates you because it's just like not optimally zero waste yet?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think I think takeout probably is a big one for me. Or you know what I have yet to find? Like so when I go, if I'm out, if I know I'm going to be out for the whole day, and again, a lot of this was pre-COVID, but and I would have to stop and get food. Like I had to do this in a client and that event, whatever. I would bring like my water bottle. I would bring usually like a coffee tumbler or a mason jar. And then I'd have to have like a food container because I'm going to stop for food. It's like, I don't have enough room for
Yeah.
that. So they make collapsible coffee cups. There's collapsible water bottles, but I have yet to find like a really good, like collapsible container. Cause I
Oh,
bring
like a Tupperware.
like a collapsible Tupperware. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I feel like my weakness is always candy. I have such a sweet tooth. Like you could wake me up at like 7 o'clock in the morning and like hand me a piece of candy and I would eat it just because I love cake and candy and like everything in that. But candy is awful, awful, awful. The wrappers, everything is awful. And I actually, part of my family celebrates Lunar New Year, and all of us in our family got a box filled with chocolate coins with foil wrappers. And
Oh, so
I was
recyclable.
so happy because I was like, yes, I can guilt-free eat all this chocolate and there's no wrappers.
Yeah,
We
that's a good point though.
Yeah, it's like the little things, you know. It's like what like a small and it's funny because it's such a small indulgence, but every time I do it, I'm like, "Ugh, this wrapper, like, and no
But you know
offense.
what? Sometimes you have to think about like what's the lesser of two evils. So for example, there's a company called Alter Eco Foods. So they make chocolate bars and they actually produce their chocolate. It's all fair trade and it's actually all done with like regenerative agriculture and really sustainable growing practices and soil practices. So
Oh,
to
interesting.
me, and their packaging is definitely more thoughtful. I mean, it's still packaged, it's not zero waste, but I feel good supporting a company that is working and doing practices that are going to help combat climate change. And if I have a little bit of the packaging that I can divert with TerraCycle, at least I know I'm putting my dollar towards a company that's doing good for the planet. And then
Yeah,
hopefully it'll help them with their demand.
and there are
I
other
mean, you can,
processes you know, like
yeah.
hearing. Yeah,
So you
yeah,
can
that's
think of
true.
it that way too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I know a lot of zero waste solutions are like make it yourself, and I was like, I don't have time to do that
Yeah.
sometimes. Sometimes I just need something. We got
Yeah.
a one good question in the chat, which is, Nicole, what was your favorite product switch since you started your journey a few years ago?
Ooh, my favorite product switch. Hmm. There's so many.
Does
I
one
think
stand out to you?
when hmm, I mean, I love my bamboo toothbrush and my refillable floss is amazing too. I have like the little glass floss container and you can refill the floss. So I have the same
Oh,
container.
who makes that out of curiosity?
There's, I think it's called Dental Lace, but there's also Bite toothpaste, which does the toothpaste
Oh, yeah.
tabs,
Mm-hmm.
the tablets. They also have the refillable floss. I mean, I just like such a simple thing, but I love my clean canteen water bottle too. Shampoo and conditioner bars were a big one for me as well when I first started.
I
And
love my
actually,
shampoo bar.
I love there's a company called By Humankind.
Yeah.
So they actually have refillable hand sanitizer, which is awesome.
Oh, cool.
They have a lot of refillable stuff. So so I buy like my own stainless steel like spray bottle, and then they send the sanitizer in a stainless steel like big jug, and then I just refill the same thing out of that. So that's been really cool too. But By Humankind is really, I love them and their products.
Nice. I think one of my favorite swaps was paper towels. Like I haven't
Mm,
used paper towels in probably 10 years just because I just have a stack of cloths. And
that's yeah,
it's super easy because you have to do laundry anyway. So
yes.
I feel like after a few years I was like, wow, like the paper towel industry is nuts because
Hmm.
you literally don't need them. You don't need them.
Also, my bidet. I love having a bidet.
Oh, nice. Do you have a tushy one or one of the other
No,
ones?
I have like a generic,
Oh,
like
cool.
no brand one, but yeah, it was like one of my few. I don't advocate for Amazon, but it was one of my few Amazon purchases. And then I use Who Gives a Crap toilet paper. They're like rated the best toilet paper. NRDC did a comparison about like toilet paper and tissues, they are like the #1 brand out of any brand. They're
Really?
100% recyclable.
I
It's
have to
100%
try them.
recyclable.
Oh,
It's
I
great.
didn't
And
know that.
they send it to you. It comes in like 2 days. I have it on auto refill like every 3 months, and it's actually like pretty soft. I love it. It's great.
Oh, I'll have to try that. And
Yeah.
actually, as I feel like people in this webinar would appreciate this, but if anyone here uses 7th generation anything, the founder of 7th generation just did a podcast on the NPR podcast, How I Built This. It's like a podcast for entrepreneurs. It's really interesting. And the founder talks about like making low waste products in like the 80s basically, and
Oh, wow.
how different it was, and how now, it's can we say it's mainstream now? I feel like it is it maybe
I don't know. I think it's close. Yeah,
close?
it's the most mainstream it's ever been.
At least in the media, not necessarily in use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like where everyone here is interested in it, right? So we're all here talking about it, but I think, anyways, I recommend the podcast. It's really interesting just to hear them talk about how culture
Yeah.
has shifted over the past 30 years.
I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that. I feel like I learned a few things. I need to join a Swab group is one of my action items, because I feel like I'm missing out. And let's see, one thing just popped up. Oh no. Nicole, can you remind everybody how they can stay in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. So Instagram, I think, is definitely the biggest platform I use in terms of social media. So Zero Waste NYC Workshop on Instagram. You can go to our website, which is zerowastenyc.info. And then you can email me, or you can actually just DM me on Instagram. Totally fine. I'm always in the DMs answering people. If you have any type of question, I'm happy to help. And then go to our websites. So zerowastenyc.info/upcoming workshops to see our upcoming events. And we're on Eventbrite. All of our tickets are sold on Eventbrite. The first 50 tickets are free, and then the rest are donation based. And 30% of the donations go back to Sanitation Foundation. So we'd love to see everyone at a future workshop. Our next one is March 3rd, and it's Zero Waste Fashion.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
So March 3rd, stay in touch with Nicole to hear about Zero Waste Fashion. Oh my gosh. I've had way too many Zoom calls today that ironically, my batteries are just like running out right now.
There you go.
So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Emma, for organizing this, and great to see everybody in the audience. And we will see you at the next Group Hug webinar in 2 weeks, and we'll be announcing the topic soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a great night,
coming,
everyone.
Crystal and Ellen. Bye.
Bye.